Well, good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So this is the four conversations we've been having about the liturgy of the holidays. We spoke before about Rosh Hashanah for 2 sessions, and then last week before Rosh Hashanah, we spoke about Kol Nidrei. And now I want us to look at, we'll start with the Torah service for Yom Kippur morning, and then we'll look into some of the special sections of the Musaf Amidah. We already had some conversation about the Slichot, the the beating our chest and remembering where we haven't quite made it. And I'll remind you one little piece that I had found from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, who said in one of his newest books, I'm not sure which one, but because I heard an interview, haven't seen the book yet, that one of the innovations of Jewish tradition was in some ways taking responsibility for our actions, that we acknowledge that we sin, not that we blame someone else for our mistakes, not that we blame God for our mistakes, not that we blame our children for our mistakes, but saying, hey, God, we messed up. And not just to say, hey, God, we messed up, but to say to those that we hurt, hey, I'm sorry. How can we make this better? How can I do better? How can I change and make a better choice moving forward? So what I'll do, and we'll see how cooperative it will be, but I will share the screen. And we have here the Torah service initially, which looks fairly familiar. It starts out just as it would on any of the 3 festivals or Shabbat. The difference, as we saw on the first day of Rosh Hashanah versus the second day of Rosh Hashanah, that on the first day, when it was Shabbat, we did the Be'ana Rachetz, like Shabbat, and on the second day, we did the Adonai, Adonai, Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emet. So we do that same procedure, and this year, the Yom Kippur is on Monday, so it is not, we don't have to worry about Shabbat. So we take the Torah out, and then we go back in time. We are reading in the first day of, on Rosh Hashanah, we read about our connection to Abraham and to the generations that would follow. We talked about Abraham and Hagar and Ishmael on the first day. We spoke about Abraham and Isaac and the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, on the second day. Well, today we get a reminder from the Torah of what was the historical Yom Kippur. How did Yom Kippur start? And we have a very clear set of rituals that happened in the time of the temple, or in the Torah, in the time of the Mishkan, the traveling temple in the wilderness. And it's interesting, we're reading from Parshat Achrei Mot in the book of Leviticus. Aaron, who is the high priest, is tasked with serving God and serving the Jewish people in a moment when one might have thought he should be mourning. He's just lost 2 of his sons through they had come too close to God with strange fire. And Vaydaber Adonai al Moshe achrei mot shnei bnei Acharon, after the death of these 2 sons who had drawn too close, God says to Moshe, here's the regulations. Here's what you got to do. He's not to come whenever he feels like it to the, into the ark. He's not to go behind the curtain only at a set time. And he has to wear specific clothing. And he needs to offer expiation with a bowl of purification for himself, for his household. And that, we read some of this again in the Avoda service. The Avoda service being later on in our Machzor, where we focus on the reminder again of what happened in the time of the temple. So we have, over the course of Yom Kippur, we think about the biblical experience in our Torah reading. We talk about the temple time experience with the Avoda service, and then throughout, we're thinking about our own experience. How do we make atonement? How do we verbally confess and acknowledge our mistakes so that we can move forward and learn from them? So let's make this a little bigger because I can't see it. And then we have a second ritual. So we have an acknowledgement of this bowl of purification, but then we also have these two goats. And what happens with the goats? Who remembers?
He sets one free, and the other one is sacrificed.
Okay, so we get two goats. One's that's going to be set free and one that's going to be sacrificed. And it's the language is weird about the one that's set free because it says one is marked for God and the other for Azazel. And the rabbis get a little uncomfortable, like, who is this Azazel? Is Azazel, like a bad spirit? Is Azazel just the wilderness? Is Azazel, a barren place? And you can see on the side in our Machzor, we have this commentary on that of wondering who is Azazel and what is the purpose of it. So that the two goats had to be exactly the same, and what determined which one was being sacrificed to God and which one was being sent away? A lottery. It was, basically flip a coin and or pull a number out of the hat, really, a lot out of the hat. But it's this, this is the origin of the term scapegoat. That's one goat that we're putting the sins upon and then getting rid of it. And later on in the rabbinic commentaries, they talk about how they got rid of the goat that went to Azazel, that it wasn't just, sent off in the wilderness where it might possibly come back and, you don't want your sins coming back to you. So they talk about actually like throwing it off a cliff or sending it off a cliff so that way it definitely wasn't coming back. So we have these two goats. And then again, Aaron is tasked with this, a bull sacrifice, which is if we're thinking about the financial piece here, you have the grain offerings that are relatively minimally expensive. You have, bird offerings. You have goat offerings and sheep offerings. You have bull offerings. That's a big one. That's a major financial sacrifice. And this is coming from the community, but it's offered by the high priest on behalf of those others. And then there's very clear instructions of he's taking the coals and the incense and where does he put the coals, and he needs to do it exactly correctly or else he's not coming back. And then he has to take the blood and sprinkle it 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, 1 and 7 times. And then there's some repetition in this process. And after this blood and after everything else, we're now finding the goat again. And he's designating the scapegoat and designating the goat for God. And through all this blood and this financial sacrifice and the day itself, the sins of the Israelites are being wiped away. And, over the course of this time, as we read in the Avodah service, the high priest is washing himself many times. He's changing his clothes many times. But eventually we get to the part that feels more present for us. On page 281, we're, in verse 29, and this shall be a day for you, or a law for all time. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you'll practice self-denial and do no matter of work, neither the citizen or the alien. For on this day, expiation shall be made for you to purify you of all your sins. You shall be pure before God. So in Hebrew, Ki bayom hazeh yikaper alechem, letacher etchem mikol hatotechem lifnei Adonai titaru. And the question that I wonder, based on the literal meaning of the verse, is what is it that purifies us? Is it the sacrifice? Is it the day itself? Is it the actions that we perform on this day, or is it something else? And I'm curious to hear your perspective just based on this. Just remember to unmute yourself first.
All right, I'm going to start, and I'm going to give the big answer, the large envelope. Why isn't it all of it? Why does it have to be a specific part? Can it not be all of it?
Oh, you. From my perspective, at least, I think that's the classic rabbinic answer is it's not any one of these things; it's the combination thereof. So then the question comes today, in a time when we don't have the sacrifice, what is our substitute? Charla, you look like you were going to say something, or?
Well, I'm a little confused.
Okay.
I mean, because when, reading this and listening to you read, I agree. It sounds like it has to be all of it. Like it can't be just one thing. It has to be the sacrifice. It has to be the blood. It has to be the washing, the changing of garments. But how do we do that today? We do not have a temple. We don't sacrifice. So is it just a matter of each one's own personal spiritual growth between our heart and God? I mean, I know what other religions think and say, but we know that's not true.
So I think it's a combination of things. I mean, the rabbinic, we are not biblical Jews, we're rabbinic Jews. We as Jews understand our Torah not entirely from a literal perspective, but based on the generations and generations of interpretation. And as part of that, our tradition teaches us that reciting the words of the sacrifices is as if we have offered the sacrifice, is one piece. And then also, what I mentioned on Rosh Hashanah, the story of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai at the ruins of the temple with Rabbi Yehoshua. That's in our prayer book at the beginning. that they're standing there at the smoking ruins of the temple, and the generation just after the destruction, and it's that loss is very fresh. And the student says to the teacher, exactly what you just said. How can we possibly atone for our sins in a world without the temple? And the teacher says to the student, that God has already given us the answer, that in the book of Hosea, and Isaiah says similar things as well, loving kindness I desire, not sacrifice. That if we, and in fact, the Haftarah that we'll look at in just a moment, I think is one of the most powerful Haftarahs that we read, and also one that really, should, sort of set our teeth on edge a little bit, and make us feel a little uncomfortable, which is saying, again, the moment when we're fasting, Isaiah is telling us your fast is meaningless if you're not also feeding the hungry, if you're not also taking care of those who are in need, if you're not also, making this world better to the extent of your abilities. That's not saying you give more than you have, because our tradition speaks against that. You have to, you can't impoverish your children in order to help others. But that you have to do something. The rabbi, the world stands on three things according to the Mishnah. Al avodah, al haTorah, v'al avodah, v'al gemelot chasadim. That the world stands on Torah, avodah, service, and deeds of loving kindness. And what is avodah? In the time of the temple, avodah was absolutely the sacrifices. The rabbis take that avodah also means work, and say, what is the work of God? It's the avodah shebalev, the work of the heart. And what is the work of the heart? That's prayer. So for us, our sacrifice is prayer. Our sacrifice is the time that prayer takes. Rabbi Nechama Leibowitz was a brilliant Bible scholar and wrote very extensively and taught many people in Jerusalem. She had a brother who was a very interesting philosopher, Rabbi Yeshaya Leibowitz.
No.
And he had an interesting perspective on prayer. I don't think, not certainly one that was not universally accepted. But his view was that you shouldn't get anything out of prayer. Was that if you're,
4-3.
then you're not doing it right. He said you should be sacrificing your time. You should be doing this thing that seems totally meaningless to you.
Okay.
And doing that. And then if you're doing that and you're taking all this time out of your life that you could otherwise do something else, then that's your sacrifice. I think, that's far stronger language than I would ever say. I don't think, I think we can get a lot out of prayer. That the time itself is also a form of sacrifice. If we live in a world where time is money, I think about, is it worth it for me? It would seem to be monetarily cheaper for me to buy a lawnmower than to pay someone else to mow my lawn. But the amount of time that I would spend mowing my lawn may be worth more to me than the physical dollar. And those are judgments that we make all the time of, what conveniences are worth paying a premium for. That if you're if you're a lawyer who bills, $5,000 an hour, and you pay the lawn guy $100, it's definitely, it is definitely worth it to pay the lawn guy. Unless you happen to enjoy mowing your lawn, in which case it's a totally different calculus.
Right.
But I think what our tradition is teaching us is that, we have work to do. We have work to do in our hearts. We have work to do in our soul. We have work to do in our relationships. And I think there's actually, an interesting note on the side here, about sacrifices, that we imagine the emotion of an ancient Israelite offering sacrifice. You wouldn't slaughter an animal. You might even only have a couple of them. So this was really an economic sacrifice. In biblical times, the part of the animal that's offered to God is totally burnt. And it made it clear to those participating that the animal wasn't being offered as food for God. Rather, as the smoke rose to the sky, it was a symbolic enactment of the attempt to reach the divine in heaven. And it may even have been offered in complete silence, adding to the awe. And we don't have that system of sacrifice, but we do have the memory of those who sought to draw close. And on the same lines, when we'll get to, Yizkor in a few minutes, one of the essence of the Yizkor prayers that, we don't always love to talk about is that it says very clearly we're donating money in their memory. And we're donating money in order to, follow in the causes that they cared about, to support the community, that doing a good deed in someone else's name is to be an agent of them, and it's as if they are doing something good. But with all of this, it's it is, as Risha said, all of the above. And even if in this moment we don't have the temple, by remembering the temple, by offering our financial sacrifice, by offering the sacrifice of our time, by offering our prayers, by doing the best we can to fast if we're our health allows that, and if it doesn't, to remain observing the other prohibitions of the day, to make atonement, in our relationships. All those things help us to reach this day. Because what does it say, in addition to not doing the work, it says, Shabbat Shabbaton hi lachem ba'anitem et nashotechem katolam. And it's this weird language of saying, that you're going to do some kind of self-denial, and you're going to do this, every year on this day. And yet, when I look at our actual liturgy, when we look at our regular daily prayers, in every single Amidah, not once a day, not twice a day, but 3 times a day, every single time we do the Amidah, we ask God for forgiveness and acknowledge our wrongdoing. And then, the one that's always struck me is we do Ma'ariv. At the end of Yom Kippur, we do Ne'ilah, we do Havdalah, and we do Ma'ariv service and blow the shofar. And in that Amidah, there's no modification to say, okay, we just spent 25 hours praying and fasting and everything else. We don't need to ask you for forgiveness again. In that Amidah, we ask God for forgiveness, even after we've beat our chest 14 times over the course of the last 25 hours, and how many times that we did slichot before that. So it really is supposed to be, we have this yearly moment, but it should be a year-round process.
Rabbi, in daily prayer and on Shabbat, well, it's not, I don't think it's not on Shabbat, but in daily prayer, when you do that, you don't see people doing this usually. Should you? Should you not? Is it?
So it is customary in the Amidah when you get to the hang on, let me open a Siddur.
Because there is that one paragraph but I'm embarrassed to say when I look around, because I should be totally focused on my prayer, but you don't often see people doing this daily.
So when we say Slach lanu avinu ki hatanu machalanu makenu ki pashanu, it is not uncommon for people to do two chest knocks during that prayer. It is a traditional practice, even if it is not necessarily a universal one.
But less followed than on Yom Kippur.
Yeah, I mean, on Yom Kippur we have that routine is more ingrained, shall we say. So let's, oh, no, wrong thing, go back. No, come back. The maptir on Rosh Hashanah is very similar to the maptir on Rosh Hashanah, of just a reminder of the sacrifices that are offering, which goes in some ways to Charla's mention of, what do we do without the sacrifice? We read the sacrifice. And it looks like I'm going to have to stop the share for just a second to reload the page, because for some reason it likes to freeze when I'm screen sharing. Okay, so now let's share it again. So now, as I said, we'll go to the Haftarah. And we have Isaiah. And as a Jewish history refresher, Isaiah's prophecies go over a particularly long time. So there's discussion from a academic of Deutero-Isaiah, or even, now I'm blanking on the Latin for third Isaiah, that other ways Isaiah seems to live a couple hundred years. So he could have lived a long time, or there might have been a couple of Isaiahs. But this is, later in Isaiah, and this Isaiah is living at the time when Cyrus of the Persians has conquered the Babylonians. So this is during the first exile. So, the Babylonians had conquered the Jews. There was a large, anyone wealthy or prominent was brought into Babylonia, and they didn't really care much for the less economically strong, and the Babylonian process was much like the Assyrians, where you bring people to new lands, and then they're less likely to revolt if they're not all together and in their element. Was the thought process. The Persians had a totally different leadership philosophy, which was that if you more or less let people live the life that they want to live, they'll be fine paying their taxes, and if they're happy, they're not gonna revolt. So Cyrus, when he becomes, takes over the Babylonian Empire, is saying, okay, you can go back to Jerusalem, you can rebuild your temple, and look, I'll even give you some seed money to get you started. So this is opening, Vayimer Sulu Sulu Panu Derech Haru Mikshol Mederech Ami. Build the highway, build the road, clear it up, remove the obstacles. Let's go back. Now the challenge is, what Isaiah is already seeing is, so I would, think about, many people. They move to a new place because of economic necessity or, other reason, and then they get used to the place. They don't feel the need to go back so quickly. So these Jews who are living in Babylonia are saying, well, it's nice that we can go back and build the temple, but, things aren't so bad here. our businesses are thriving, our life's pretty good. We figured out how to be Jews in exile. We'll just hang here. And we know that a significant number of Jews did not return because after the destruction of the Second Temple, there is a strong and established Jewish community in Babylonia. Now, we don't know historically so much of what their lives were like from, the 500 BCE until 300 CE. That 800 years, we don't have so much. But, following that, we get the Talmud, and we get a huge insight into the Jewish life in Babylonia. But we have this Haftorah, and God is saying, through the words of Isaiah, you've got an opportunity. We can try again. I'm God. I support the spirit of the lonely. I revive the hearts of the contrite. And look, I'm not angry forever. That I was upset that, you guys were doing things you weren't supposed to. You were worshiping other gods. You were not following the Torah. You got punished, and there's not safety for the wicked, but that, it's going to be okay. And then here's that part that I was mentioning before. They ask, Lama tsamnu velo ra'ita aninu nafshenu velo teda hein bayom tzomchem timtzu chafetz v'chol atzvechem tin goshu. We afflicted ourselves. We starved ourselves. Why didn't you pay attention? And God answers, on your fast day, hen bayom tzomchem, you were still doing your business and you were oppressing the laborers. And if you're fasting in strife and contention and still striking with a wicked fist, then your fast is not going to be heard. That's not the fast they desire. It's not just starving yourself. It's not just bowing your head and putting sackcloth and ashes. The fast I desire is to unlock, get rid of your bad ways, get rid of your wickedness, untie the yoke, let the oppressed go free, share your bread with the hungry, take the wretched, pour into your home. When you see the naked, clothe them, and don't ignore your own flesh. This is why, when we had our picking up the baskets, we also were donating food to Gulf Coast. In many synagogues across the country, in a normal year, you have the Operation Isaiah or some other similar, where come to Kol Nidre with a bag of food and put it in the bucket to support the food pantry, and so that as you go into your fast, you're going in supporting those in need. And it's working out nicely for us in our neighborhood. I mentioned this morning, our neighborhood had a food drive about a month ago for the St. Pete Free Clinic. What they've decided is they're going to keep doing it every month. So once a month, they're going to have the bins in front of, a half a dozen houses, and you can drop off something. And they said it's not that you have to go buy out Costco or Sam's to make a difference. If you have a neighborhood with several hundred people, if everybody drops off one thing, it makes a difference. And if everybody drops off a bag, it makes an even bigger difference. And if we go buy out Sam's or Costco, well, then even better. But that you don't have to, you can make a difference without making yourself go broke. Although it is interesting, different people's definitions of broke. I saw an article online the other day from Forbes of a former billionaire who had created a foundation with his wife to give away more or less all their money, and their private assets now are a couple $1 million retirement plan. And so from Forbes' perspective, they were broke. But, you know, I guess $2 million compared to the $30 billion they gave away, it's, you know, sounds like a lot to me, but it's, you know, if you're used to living a billionaire lifestyle, it's a little different. But again, like, you know, so from what I'm seeing in our tradition, what I'm seeing in our Torah, what I'm seeing in our Haftorah, is yes, we have the ritual piece of all of this. And the ritual piece is that physical part for our souls that helps us do what we need to do to really understand. But then we also have the physical part to share that with those around us, and that together the physical and the ritual should lift up our spiritual sides. You know, and you know, like what I said on Rosh Hashanah, like there is always more for us to do, and we cannot do everything. But lo alacha hamlacha ligmor, you know, just because we're not commanded to finish the task, doesn't mean that libatel mimenu, that we nullify it or we don't bother. You know, our Torah speaks of poverty, you know, as an affliction, and says that in an ideal society there will not be poverty, but it acknowledges that we're probably, you know, in our lifetimes not going to live in an ideal society, so we have to take care of the poor and the less fortunate. So I want to switch gears for a minute. So we were talking about the Torah reading, we're talking about the Haftorah. Now let's look a little bit about Yizkor. So the first part of Yizkor, you know, we have little poems and things to help get us ready. And then we have the essential prayer, like the prayer Yizkor itself is that quiet personal prayer, and the way they, you know, every Siddur or Machzor does it a little bit differently. In this one, they offer it in two variations. In some of the older books, they did it, you know, for a father, for a mother, for a sister. So this is just, you repeat it as many times as you need. But you know, they have the male version and the female version. Hebrew is a gendered language. And it's saying, Yizkor Elohim et Nishmat, may God remember the soul of my blank. Abba, Ima, Ish, Ishti, brother, sister, son, daughter, relative. Shachal le'olama, who has gone to their eternal home. In the parentheses is plural if instead of reading one at a time, you're reading in bulk. Hinani nodeb tzedakah. Ba'ed haskerut nishmata, I pledge tzedakah in their honor. You know, that's why we do the Yizkor cards or the Yizkor pledges, because what we say when we say this prayer is, I pledge tzedakah. Ana, tehei nafshat tzoror b'tzor chaim utem nuchata kavod. So vas machot et panecha ne'emot mimen natzach. So through my actions, let me emulate their actions and connect them to God. May they be bound up in the bond of life. May they be in the shelter of God's wings. May they be in the presence of God. May I appreciate the gifts that they gave me. And let these moments of, you know, that's a pretty poetic translation, let the moments of meditation strengthen the ties that link me to their memory. May they rest in peace. Amen. So, you know, just in case, you know, that just because people have nothing better to do, there's been Facebook and Twitter wars in the last few days with the Honorable Ruth Bader Ginsburg of people saying, why is everyone saying, Jews saying, why are you saying rest in peace? Rest in peace is a Christian thing, and it is frequently a Christian phrase, but it is not exclusively a Christian phrase. And also, there are so many things in the world to argue about. That's not worth my time, but if it's worth their time, fine, they can argue about whether rest in peace is being Christian centered as opposed to Jewish centered. And one of the things I find particularly essential and powerful in our Machzor is when we turn the page, so we have the traditional prayers of memories of martyrs and congregants, a special El Malay Rachamim for those who were lost in the Shoah. But there is this, did it again, there is this blessing on the side in memory of a parent who was hurtful. Because many people have good relationships with their parents and have positive remembrances of their parents, and their parents were sources of love and light and support to them over the course of their lifetimes. That is not true for everyone. And there are people for whom parents were sources of bitterness and pain, who did not provide them with the emotional or the physical support that they needed to grow up, and they had to leave home at young ages because it was safer to be out of the house than to be in the house, or it was any sort of whether physical, emotional, spiritual abuse, or just a really lousy relationship. We know that those exist, and I think this is just a phenomenal resource and acknowledgement. I pray that you, who raises up slaves to freedom, will liberate me from the oppression of my hurt and anger, and you'll lead us from the desert to your holy place. The acknowledgement that should not be a permanent black mark on our souls to have such a difficult relationship. And then we go in remembrance of all. There's a beautiful poem from Zelda as an additional reading, the 23rd Psalm, which, as we've discussed in different times and places, brings people comfort in different ways. And then closing with the Kaddish. And then we return the Torahs and lead into the Musaf service. I gotta jump a little bit. I'll stop again. Okay, so I want to share again. So before we continue, we mentioned briefly the Hineni prayer. So what is what's the point of Hineni? I'll ask that as not as a rhetorical question.
Right.
I didn't hear that. So the Hineni is this prayer, it traditionally is this big, elaborate oratory by the cantor, although I've had to condense a bit this year for the cantor, and I know that's hard because this is one of those pieces that makes Rosh Hashanah, makes Yom Kippur for his spiritual experience. It's this acknowledgement that it is a weighty responsibility to offer prayer on behalf of another. And that when you come into synagogue and put us as your shlichei tzibur, as your prayer leaders, you are giving us a great responsibility for us to assist you in prayer. And in certain times, that there were expectations, that the prayer leader was male, married, of a certain age, could grow a beard, and and was knowledgeable about but so that when they reached this moment, they can say before God, I have this great responsibility. I'm trying here. I know that I'm imperfect. Can you still forgive me? And if you forgive, don't take my sins on account of the community. So, that's a not an insignificant idea. And then concluding with Baruch Atah, not Baruch Atah Adonai, just Baruch Atah, praised are you, Shomea Tefillah. Since it's not exactly a formal prayer, it doesn't have the Baruch Atah Adonai formula, just the Baruch Atah. And again, so we've looked at the opening of the Amidah, playing games with me. Okay, we'll come back. So the opening, was that same, the recognition of the special, the special additions between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur of Zochreinu L'chaim, remember us for good. And then the Onatana Tokaf of the recognition of, that this year brings a lot, and sometimes it's for good, and sometimes it's challenging. Then again, we have the secondary prayer of the community and the Rabbi Cantor responding, let us do this right. This is a major responsibility, and we want to offer our prayer. But we first have, the Aleinu again with the opportunity to bow down. And then we go into these special sections, which go page by page, idea by idea, the acknowledgement of this great responsibility. And Charla, again, by repeating the story, by reminding ourselves what the high priest did in the Mishkan, what the high priest did in the temple, we are saying as if we are doing it. So even if we're not able to, in that moment, splash the blood, by referencing it, we are observing the custom. And, for me, one of the powerful pieces, besides the kachaya mona, the counting of 1 and counting of 2 and counting of 3, but that the high priest bows down and falls prostrate, saying, and the people respond. The high priest in the time of the temple would say God's holy name, calling out, the proper pronunciation that we don't attempt to pronounce, and the people would respond, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. But we, in our time, don't have that. I would like to take a 3-minute pause and share a video. this for me has been like a meditative time. Okay, not the
The
commercial.
fact that I no dude.
I've never been to an event or a class.
Come on, let's see if we can make it. So I played this a million times lately.
אחת ידיו רגליו טבל עליו ונסתפק בא ממקום שהוא בא והלך למקום שהלך פשט בגדי החול לבש בגדי לבן וכך היה אומר אנא השם כפר לחטאים לעוונות ולפשעים שחטאתי לפניך אני וביתי ואם אדם יכול לזכור את הפגמים, את החסרונות, את כל הפשעים, את כל העוונות בטח ככה היה מונה אחת, אחת ואחת, אחת ושתיים אחת ושלוש, אחת וארבע, אחת וחמש ישר היה מתייאש כי לא יכול היה לשאת את המרירות אחת, את הבושה, את הפספוס, את ההפסד בכהנים והעם העומדים בעזרה כשהיו שומעים את שם השם המפורש יוצא מפי כהן גדול היו קוראים משתחווים ונופלים על פניהם ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד פסע למקום שפסע פניו לקודש אחוריו להיכל ללא רבב היו שווים פיו ומעשה בא ממקום שהוא בא והלך למקום שהלך פשט בגדי לבן לבש בגדי זהב וכך היה אומר אנא השם כפר לחטאים לעוונות ולפשעים שחטאתי לפניך אני וביתי ואם אדם יכול לזכור את החסדים, את הטובות, את כל הרחמים, את כל הישועות בטח ככה היה מונה אחת, אחת ואחת, אחת ושתיים אחת מאלף, אלפי אלפים מרוב ליבו ומעבור ניסים נפלאות שעשית עמנו ימים ולילות וכהנים והעם העומדים בעזרה שהיו שומעים את שם השם המפורש יוצא מפי כהן גדול היו קוראים משתחווים ונופלים על פניהם ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד
So it's to me, like if we were doing a Zoom high holidays, I think I would simply I might just play that and call that the Avoda service. Because I don't know if other people have the same resonance that it does for me, but taking the words of this ancient ritual and his melodies are so evocative, even if you don't have that translation underneath, you can feel the building up of the ritual. and the climactic moment of the people falling on their faces and saying Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Which is why, or one of the reasons why, I will continue to mention every year that there's something powerful about falling on our face, of putting our, knees on the ground and our hands out and saying, God, I'm here. I'm trying. I ain't perfect. I'm making mistakes, but I'm here.
Rabbi, can you send me a link to that video?
Sure.
Thank you. That just, I thought that was very intense. I thought I was going to break out crying.
And he actually just released, it doesn't have the translation with it, but he released a live album, Mishai Ribo, and it was recorded right before the coronavirus. So when they say, the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, it's not just him, but it's like a concert of people. And that one gets me too. Again, like, you don't have to, like, sometimes I'm like listening for the words and sometimes I'm listening for the feeling. And the feeling there is just very, very powerful.
Send it to me also, please.
Well, how about this? I will post it on Facebook after this.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Okay. I'll reopen the window I just closed, so I remember to do that. And they offer the sacrifice, and then they conclude with this prayer. That the high priest comes out of the Holy of Holies and his face shines, and he's just aglow with this power of God, and he calls out, that this should be a year of abundance and blessing and good fortune. And you see this in Hebrew, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. It's in alphabetical acrostic. Song, life, rain, sun, harvest, atonement, that we have everything we need. And then we conclude this avoda with the, we saw that, like they saw that. We didn't experience this. Our parents didn't experience this. It's been hundreds of generations since we experienced it, and yet we still do this. Aval zechitenu ba'avoda acheret. We have other forms of service. And then here's that story that I mentioned, Pama Taban Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Yeshua were at the site of the temple, and we perform deeds of kindness and love. Gemilut chasadim, not sacrifice. And then again, we get this reminder of God's mercy. And then we have the martyrology. We remember that in Jewish history, it has not always been blessing and joy. There's been times of significant oppression and loss. And the original martyrology includes the martyrology of Shimon, Akiva, Yehuda ben Bava, and Hanina ben Tradion, who all worked to teach Torah when Torah was forbidden. This Machzor, in different Machzors, they've added different other moments. We have members of this one includes a remembrance of the First Crusade, which was not good for the Jews. So the Jews of Mainz and Speyer and Worms were attacked and killed and burned, and also the destruction of the Spanish Jewry, and a Yiddish poem of the Shoah. So we think of all these different moments. And then for me, one of a powerful moment at the end of the martyrology is the Kaddish that remembers the places that have been sources of pain for our people. Kishinev, Warsaw, Auschwitz, Dachau, Buchenwald, Babi Yar, but also acknowledging that it wasn't just in Europe that we've been attacked, that it wasn't just during the Shoah, that in Baghdad there were pogroms after the creation of the state of Israel. In Hebron, there was a Jewish community in the city of Hebron in what's now the West Bank, or Judea and Shomron, depending on one's politics. And the same in Kfar Etzion, there were Jewish communities there from forever.
Fantastic.
And in Hebron in the 20s and 30s, there were several massacres that the Arab population killed many of the members of the community, and they escaped to Jerusalem. And Kfar Etzion was a city that, it's mentioned in the Torah, in Torah, in the Bible, that is just outside of Israel, or just outside of Jerusalem, and it was a community until 1948. And in 1948, the Jordanians took over the area and destroyed it. And then in 1967, when Israel won the Six-Day War, just a few short, by 1973, they had reestablished a small community in Kfar Etzion, in the Gush Etzion, that today is a major suburb of Jerusalem and a major modern Orthodox community that that is influential to this day. And what I would imagine that if and when we were to see a final status agreement between Jews and Palestinians, that Kfar Etzion, that area, will be part of any final plan. That even though it's technically the West Bank, it is a suburb of Jerusalem, and historically one from the Bible. So and then the service continues with another round of slichot, another round of a confession, another round of acknowledging our imperfections. Which ultimately leads to the conclusion of that part of the service with Hayom and Kaddish Shalem. And then, unlike on the end of Musaf on Rosh Hashanah, where we would then, maybe do Aleinu or Adon Olam, on Yom Kippur, we do Kaddish Shalem and we stop, because the service doesn't exactly end, it just pauses and then continues when we pick up later at Mincha. And in different communities, they do different things of how to create those connections, whether it's having classes in the afternoon on Yom Kippur, and in such time when we would be continuing our service in a not curtailed manner. There are people that will come to shul and then just bring a book and stay all day. And in some communities, people would continue without interruption. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of piyutim of poems related to the liturgy of the holiday that people can add. And in many ways, there was what's, in the 20th century, there were in some ways Machzor wars. Somebody would come out with the complete high holiday Machzor. So somebody would say, "Oh, you think yours is complete? Well, I found 3 more medieval poems to stick in there." And then so someone else would say, "Well, I found 4 more medieval poems to stick in there. Mine's the complete one." So you can extend and extend and extend and add and add and add and add, or you can take a break sometime, take a nap, refresh yourself, and come back for mincha. And I think that's where we'll pause now. I don't want to. I'm not ending. I want to hear from you. I've spoken a lot, so I'm curious what questions you might have that we haven't had a chance to discuss. You have to unmute if you want to ask a question, though. Wait, Sam, you want to say something?
We're so used to staying till the end and getting our bags and breaking the fast. We don't know what to do this year.
Pack yourself a little bag and have it ready.
In my kitchen.
Well, in some ways, I don't know if it's harder or, easier when you're home for that part.
It's harder.
When the kitchen is 3 steps away, the temptation is different.
Yeah.
I always had such great respect for the historically women who were preparing the break the fast, so that way when the men came home from shul, it was all ready for them. I don't know how you can do that. And slicing the lox and the tomatoes and the bagels when you're trying to fast is
Yeah, hold on.
is really something.
That would be very hard.
It was also that way when you're a parent and you're, in youth services and the kids get lunch. And so you're serving them, and somehow it always smelled better, even if it was only peanut butter and jelly that day. Right. Rabbi, going back to the Haftorah, you're talking about, I think what struck me in the, everybody gives a little, and you're building a better community. And so much of Judaism is about being a part of a community. There's so much of our tradition that you can't do alone. And that was a theme that kind of struck me when you were talking, again, your food bank. If everybody gives 1 can or 1 bag, look what happens, and nobody feels overburdened. That was something that struck me.
And I think the same thing goes true with society as a whole. Like if everyone's doing their part, it's manageable. If you have a lot of people that are saying I'm opting out, I'm not participating, then things get a lot more complicated. Like when we look at a synagogue membership, if everybody contributes what they can contribute, the synagogue's in great shape, and we don't have to worry about finances for programs or staff or anything like that. If everybody says, "Oh, it's someone else's responsibility," then we've got a problem. Or, if we don't, say it's the older people's responsibility or the younger people's responsibility, until we say it's my responsibility, we've got trouble.
No. And collectively, we can all make a greater impact than any of us can do individually.
Absolutely.
Whether it's with, financial resources, time, action, food donations, whatever, if you're doing something as part of a community, it's more impactful.
So I think ultimately, yes, so does Yom Kippur atone on its own? Does simply living through Yom Kippur, showing up the next day, mean that you're forgiven for your sins? I don't know. There is a stream of philosophy that says on a certain level, yes. But I think we get a lot more out of it if we participate in it as well. If whether it's participating on, in the service online, or coming into the building, or offering time to support other people in the days and weeks before and after, and all year round. I think ultimately Yom Kippur is really saying, as Jews, the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance in Yom Kippur, to me are saying, let your whole life be like this. Not necessarily the fasting part, but the action part. How do we bring that into the rest of the year? Well, that's my prayer, is that as we go into this year, that we can see a better world, not just on one day, but on all the days. So that's it.
And this year, more than many other years, we really need that in so many different realms.
So I wish you all Shana Tova, a healthy new year, that you should be written and sealed in the book of life.